Hi, this video is about coronavirus / COVID-19 SEO. What has changed? What can you do differently? How can you work your business more towards taking into account what needs to be taken into account without overreacting to things that might not be here to stay? So there's several different ways I want to look at this. First, I think pretty much everything that I talk about, we want to look through sort of like a short term versus maybe a medium term or and a long term kind of lens or angle. So there's always different angles you can look at things, or a different lens that you can apply to something to kind of make it look differently. For example, the short term trend of the demand for toilet paper versus the long term trend for remote work. So the total amount of toilet paper that we need, it isn't going to really change overall, but short term, there are people out there panicking and buying it up, which causes more people to panic and buy it up, right? But eventually, like, the total amount of toilet paper that we'll use, over the next 5 years hasn't really changed. Now, the demand for remote work and kind of the tools around it, like Zoom or webcams and stuff like that, that I think is a long-term trend that you can look at and say, oh, okay, there are going to be companies that didn't want to give some of their employees remote work opportunities that they are forced to do now, that maybe they end up liking it more than they want. All right, not all companies. Maybe some companies hate it, but some companies are probably going to like it. And so that could be something that, like, a year, 2, 3 years down the line, that is going to be something that actually is still probably going to be a permanent change. Okay, so looking at things from the short term versus the long term, and combining that with all the other data points that you have. I do understand that there's sort of a balance here, and it's different for different people. Obviously, kind of survive now versus build for the future. With SEO is typically a pretty long-term affair where it takes time to get results. Now, with something that's really urgent or brand new, sometimes you can jump in there and capture something and maybe get some short-term benefits. Now, I'm a much bigger fan of building for the future, just building. I think this is how you get long-term, year after year, improving your income. Most years, my income's gone up every year except in the last 8 years, except once. And so, that is what I try to do. Obviously, I'm not perfect or claiming that you have to be perfect in order for that to work. But the idea of building for the future is going to be more helpful, and it's in the long term, because you're essentially building for the future. But sometimes I understand there are short-term events that you need to take advantage of. So considering that, what your needs is going to be really important, or where your business is at. If you need to pay your mortgage next month, then building for something that's going to make you $1 million in 2 years is not really going to help you, right? You need something that's going to make you $5,000 as soon as possible, or at least as much as possible, right? And I've kind of alluded to this before. Are there like fundamental shifts? So really try to practice as a skill for now and well into the future, because this is something that I think is useful basically as long as you're in business, kind of looking for trends, but also kind of looking for false trend signals. There's a lot of ways in which people think they see trends when they don't. And one of the kind of the tools that I have to kind of differentiate like a false signal versus a long-term trend is kind of following down the road, like really thinking about, like, okay, let's really walk through this in my mind. What's next month, then the following month, and the following month, and then the following year, and the following decade. What's really going to be affected by this? And this is sort of like some guy kind of looking into the future. You can kind of see into the future to some degree when you really look like this, or you just try. And another important data point that I didn't put here is sort of, so a lot of times a trend is numerical, or it's quantitative. There are numbers attached to it. And so understanding that the data that is in our world it often appears to be a straight line, which is called linear. But in actuality, it is almost every data set is nonlinear, which is basically means like it's curvy. And it's oftentimes very complicated, and it can go, and you look at these mathematical distributions sometimes, and they go in really weird like directions that you just like kind of like, how is that even possible? But how is it even possible if there's a mathematical formula behind that? But there often is. And so that's a key distinction, to not just always understand that, okay, well, is it going up or is it going down, sort of like within a straight line. That is pretty rare that there's something that actually has a natural distribution like that, or even, like a human-made distribution. Okay, so let's talk about SEO specifically. Now that we kind of have some lenses and some different angles to look at things. So for me personally, I am not concerned about SEO going away, and I think that there are a lot of opportunities, and some new or some short term. But to me, I look at it and I compare it to like plumbing or electricity or, the internet in general. And I think it's a fundamental part of our lives now, and it's going to be around for the rest of our lives. The ability to searching the human database of knowledge for answers is going to be valuable for the rest of our lives. And then also you have like with commercial intent. This is typically, there's a lot of them have commercial intent. Even without commercial intent, it still is valuable, but there's still going to be a lot of things that people are searching that are going to have commercial intent. And yet, yes, there are some trends. I'm going to talk about some kind of search trends that I've noticed. But in general, I think that, SEO is fine, and it's still something that you can invest in now, and it'll be valuable now, and it'll be valuable 2, 5, 10, 20 years from now. Even if Google gets taken over by another competitor, that's fine. You just switch over your skills to that other competitor, and maybe it's kind of the same stuff, a lot of the same stuff. Google's algorithm, other than like the maps listings, hasn't really changed dramatically. In my opinion, they're kind of moving more towards like the voice search, but it's not really a fundamental shift. So to me, as much as it's sort of like a surface shift in how they interpret the information coming in. They're still kind of searching the database of human knowledge and trying to give you answers. But again, if Yahoo for whatever reason suddenly takes all the market share, that's not like a problem with SEO. It's more about how valuable is it to be able to look up Tom Cruise's birthday, just to it on your phone in like 5 seconds. Like 30 years ago, you just couldn't do that. You'd have to know it, or you just have to be like, I don't know. And obviously that's a silly example, but there's tons of other things like that it's just so incredibly useful and has so much utility to be able to do that it's not going away, in my opinion. Just like plumbing and electricity. Okay, so there actually is a tool called Google Trends. So trends.google.com. And there's a lot of different angles that you can look at things here. Right here, I got the past 12 months. You can go all the way back to, I think it depends on the search, like 2004, I think is as early as it goes, where they started tracking this data. And this is a relative data. So the highest number is always 100, unless it has no data, and it just would be at 0. And so what this is telling us, so if you don't know what a bidet is it's like a French thing that they use to kind of squirt water up into your bottom after you go to the bathroom. And there's a sudden surge in need for this because of the toilet paper trend. It reduces the amount of toilet paper you need, and so there was a lot of demand for this as people started buying up all the toilet paper. And you can see like what states have some of the highest demands, at least right now. You can look at this from different angles. This is a useful tool for confirming what you already believe. So another data point in this for me was that I was thinking about, okay, people are spending more time at home, and so they're using their home more and putting more wear and tear on their home. And so I wondered, like, okay, are some home services getting more search volume? Like, are people calling plumbers more? And it turns out, yes, in some cases they are. In some cases it's flat. For less emergency type services, it's down. So like remodeling your kitchen, you're not going to call a remodeler into your home right now. But if your electricity is out, your internet is down, or your you got a leak in your house, you can't be worrying about the virus, and you still have to call a plumber. Or your AC is out. My AC went out, and I had to call an AC guy. It was like we can't live here without AC. I live in Texas, and it gets very hot. So this is a really good tool for looking at things. I would take the data with a grain of salt as well. It's not perfect. No data is going to be perfect, and the lower volume, the less accurate it is. And sometimes it's surprising, which makes me kind of question the data in some ways, which is that you put two very similar things in and you get two very different results. So I would put in a bunch of different, before you made a really strong conclusion, put in a bunch of different search terms, and see what you can kind of figure out from there. So really your best tool here, and I've alluded to it a lot, is going to be your brain. Really thinking about, and I talked about this quite a bit already, like next week, next month, next year, next decade, all together. And then pulling in like all the connecting factors. For example, like in trucking, should you start a trucking career? I bet there's probably pretty good demand for this, and I think that the truckers are still working. So that sounds good, right? But to me, like in 10 years, that's going to be an industry where I'd say probably, my guess is a very high percentage, maybe 90%, maybe higher, maybe a little bit lower, is going to be taken over by autonomous trucks, autonomous cars. And maybe you don't believe that, but I feel pretty strongly that is inevitable. Maybe not 10 years, maybe 20 years, maybe 5 years. It's hard to say how fast it'll happen. But none of that might seem like, well, that's completely separate, but it's not. And so you do have to kind of think about, really try to brainstorm on what's going to happen. And you don't have to be perfect for it to be useful. You can be dead wrong, and it still be a useful activity that can help lead you and guide you. And in fact, you inevitably will be wrong about certain things. But this is one of the most powerful things that humans can do, is to kind of model the future. And so take advantage of this. And this is a skill. And so the more you do this, the more useful it'll be for you. And this is something that you would want to do outside of coronavirus, just in general. Practice this skill, work on it, and it will serve you well for the rest of your life. So anyway, let me know what you think. Put a comment below if you have any questions or thoughts, or if there's any tools that you know of that help with SEO right now or well into the future. And please like this video if you like it. You're still listening to me. Hopefully you like it. And subscribe. And thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye.